For survey-based methods, the key to not having a miserable time is setting it up correctly. So I'll show you one that somebody did for nutrition, and I have to say this is not how to do it. So this is the raw data that they got to start with. Now, if you use a survey-based method, you're probably going to use Google Forms. So that means when you download it, it'll go into Excel. And to be quite honest, using Excel is quite fine for tidying up your data. It's possibly easier to do the first steps in Excel than it is to do in SPSS. So there's 118 people here. It's not a massive survey, but it's still inconvenient to have to do very much. The first question is, I confirm that I'm willing to be a participant. Now you have to do this, remember your ethics. One person said no, which is they do not participate in the rest of the research. So that's a blank line. That's fairly easy to deal with. So actually there's only 116 people in here. I forgot one of the things out. Next we have gender, which has a limited number of categories. You can be flexible with that as you want to. So male, female, non-binary, whatever, however you want to specify them. You're not going to get more than about 6 different categories, even if you allow. So if you allow self-identification, they only have 2. If you prefer add non-binary, that's 3. If you prefer not to say that, it's 4. Probably that's as complicated as you want to get. In age, just specify that you want them to put a number thing, so that if they put in something like 19 years, it doesn't allow you to do it. The new version of Google Forms allows you to specify reasonable values. So one person put a number in here, but obviously it's the year that they were born. I don't think they're actually 1,995 years old. So you can work out from there how old they are. Although when they filled in the survey, they're a different age to they are now. Okay, no, that's fine. It was filled in. Well, I don't know, because you don't know when their birthday is, so which month it's in. So it's still a bit tricky, but let's assume that they weren't born in January, so they won't have gotten older. Anyway, it's a pain, but let's assume that they're 25. And one person put 20 years old, and you don't want it as text, you want it as... Right. Now here, to be honest, age gives away who the person is. And there's missing data there. Age rather gives away who people are, so be careful about that. We've got a small subset of data where you've got some restrictive categories, because if you know that they're doing nutrition and they're 37-year-old and a woman, then that pretty much nails down exactly who they are, even if they haven't told you. So you have to be careful about confidentiality and thinking about how many questions you can ask before it becomes apparent who they are. The same with weight. Make sure that in weight you're asking for a number. This person's not quite sure how much they weigh. 156 kilos. Really? Wait a minute. 156 person is 100, right. The world's heaviest person is 442 kilos. That's big. Heaviest man ever was John Bower Minnock. He was definitely somewhat large. So it's not completely impossible, but that's quite large. I suspect that they've confused pounds. And yeah, another person putting in pounds. So if you think, if you've got two different scales that aren't going to overlap with each other, so pounds is going to be in the hundreds, whereas kilos is likely to be less than 100, then you can specify in the form that it has to be numeric and it should be within this particular range. If someone happens to be outside that range, then that's unfortunate, but otherwise it stops you having these difficulties. You can also probably specify how many decimal places you want to do. Any decimal places in weight is not really a good idea because you vary by at least half a kilo just from the time you get up to the time you go to bed. What was your height the last time you measured? I'm trying to think where I read that. There's an interesting article that if you look at the relationship between height and weight of people who are naked when you do the measurements compared to people who are clothed, then you get a much better correlation between the two because you don't have to take into account the Dr. Martens or the high heels or the whatever else. There's making a lot more variation just because of dress. And clothes can make quite a difference in size. Next thing, you've got ethnicity. Now again, I begin to think that they allowed quite a lot of writing. So people could put in, so West Asian and East Asian and Arabic and Arab and Latin, restrict the categories. Now the reason for doing this is when you do the statistical analysis afterwards, what you're most likely going to do is something called a chi-squared test. Now, when you summarize this data, you're going to produce what's called a contingency table. So a contingency table will have two axes of describing your data. So let's say one of them is what is your course, and the other one is what is your ethnicity. So you can have the courses across in your columns and your ethnicities along in your rows. Now, so it divides into a table which is going to have as many cells as rows times columns. Now, if you assume that people who participate in your survey are equally likely to be in any one of the courses and equally likely to be in any of their ethnicities, then they're equally likely to be in any one of those cells within that table. So if you've got 10 cells in that table, you need to have on as a if you're predicting equal distribution in every single one of the cells, you need to have an estimated 5 people in each cell. That means you would need to have, if you've got 10 cells in your table, you'd need to have 50 participants. If you have 20 cells, you need 100 participants. So the more categories you have, the more problems you have in collecting a big enough sample. So what you want to do is merge these as much as you can. Now here, it's rather difficult to do. So what is your ethnicity and things? So this is where it's a good idea, after you've done a bit of cleaning up, so I did a bit of cleaning up, is to import it into SPSS. So once you've done a bit of cleaning for obvious things like missing data and numbers that are not numbers and things like that, I've simplified the degree pathway because there was a person who had criminal law and so I've simplified it to other. I put in a value for missing data when any missing data is needed. Everybody's yes on confirming to the course. I've got a nice simple table for the gender. Ages are also tidied up. I've got one there's missing. That needs to be a 999. That's a missing variable. So what you're doing is going to each one of the columns. So pick ethnicity. So if I go to analyze, descriptive statistics, frequencies, I'm going to look at what's happening in the ethnicity column. I spelled ethnicity wrong there. Yes, I have. I've missed the H. Oh well, I'll sort that out in a second. So this is how many ethnicities I've got at the minute. So I need to sort that out because that's far too many. So let's sort out my spelling to start with. Ethnicity, oof, the H actually after the T, not before that. Right, got ethnicity at the minute from my table. I've got this many. So I want to merge Arab, Arab, and Arabic. So that will give me a frequency of 5. That's good. That's where I'm getting. Asian, British, Bangladeshi, West African, East Asian, Indian with upper and lower case, Latin America, Latin American. So I want to merge these things together. So South Asian, I've got 3 different variants of spelling it. And South American, I've got with Latin American. So I want to put those together. Is Portuguese separate to white Caucasian in general? And what is white other? We have this fun when I fill in the surveys for my children. So I'm married to somebody who's Spanish. To me, they're exactly the same as every other white European. Why do we classify this as different? I've got no idea. But when you fill in the form, you've got white British, you've got Irish, and then I don't know, you probably have white European, but they're born to a white British parent and a white European parent, so therefore they become mixed race. And I'm like, what are you talking about? This is just idiocy. Because it's mixed between 2 of the ethnicities you've defined within your groups. Ethnicity is a minefield, and for trying to define, it's just a complete and utter mess. So there's lots in the mixed multiple ethnic group. That's good. So as you see here, what you have to do is go through and recategorize things. So if it's only one value, probably it's easy enough you can just go through and type it. If you've got to merge lots of things together, then you can do transform variables. So you can do recoding into the same variables. Or if you're really worried and you want to keep the original data and then create a new column which has the simplified one so you've not lost anything, then you can recode into a different variable. And what you'll need to do is do this for every single categorical column that you have within your data set to simplify it down until you have maybe 4 or 5 different groups. This is extremely time consuming. In between each one, I suggest you save it in case you then just change your mind and need to go back and have some other thoughts or read some papers where somebody said, well, I've treated it like this, to make sure there's consistency. So I'm a bit puzzled. Who would describe themselves as a West Asian? Where would I come from if I was going to describe myself as West Asian? Wouldn't that put you as Middle Eastern? So South Asian, this Indian subcontinent, so Bangladeshi, Nepali, Indian, Sri Lankan, and Southeast Asia, I'd assume that was, well, it used to be called Indochina, but I've got absolutely what's it called now? So Thailand, Myanmar, Vietnam, Laos, Malaysia, Indonesia. Where do you count the Philippines? It's a nightmare. It really is. Ethnicity is a tricky one. Unfortunately, for the person who did this particular, actually cancel. For this particular one, they did loads of other questions which also give terrible results when you go into descriptive statistics and frequency. So if you go into things like supplements and press OK. Oh, I've tidied this up. Ha! So do vitamins count as supplements? So we've got no, not sure, and yes. This is the kind of table you want. You want something simplified, so you go from mess like that to simple like this. Is there any other that's terrible? Descriptive frequencies. So supplements is good. Even smoking was a nightmare. So you've got no occasionally, on special occasions, when you especially want to get lung cancer. You've quit for a year, so that's no. Quit November 2019, that's still no. Sporadically, well, that's yes. Very rarely, still yes. Vaping, vape, what do you count that in? So you could have three things. So no, yes, vaping. But the choices are up to you, and make sure that you keep a record of what you're doing. This is about the specific knowledge of the individuals. And I think, again, this is a terrible question. To stop having terrible questions, make sure that you have drop-down menus. So this has got very long questions about people's opinions. So it's not actually really horrible. So a dietary supplement is a manufactured product intended to supplement the diet when taken by mouth. Dietary supplements are any substances containing minerals. So how many people believed in these particular definitions? The only problem that the person's going to have is that these things have very low frequency. So because of that, they're not going to turn up in the chi-squared test unless you have a much bigger sample and you increase the frequencies of these particular things. Because as I said, you need a frequency of 5 within your groups to be able to do chi-squared tests. Right. Any questions about that?